Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Thursday, February 13th, 2014. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Councilor McCormick?
Here.
Councilor Camardo?
Here.
Councilor Cuddy? Here. Councilor Rosica?
Here.
Here. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Remain standing for a moment of silent prayer or reflection. Thank you. Please be seated. We will start out as we normally do with our public to be heard. Clerk, if you'd read our rules and regulations.
At this time, we will open the public to be heard portion of the council meeting. As a reminder and pursuant to City Council Rules of Procedure, prior to addressing council, speakers are asked to state their name, address, and any affiliation. All comments should be addressed to the entire council and not to individual staff members. Your remarks must be limited to 3 minutes and concern only issues involving the city council, city government, or matters of general city concern. Issues involving specific employees of the city should be directed to the city manager outside of the meeting, and all speakers before council will observe commonly accepted rules of courtesy. Personal attacks or abusive language will be ruled out of order.
Thank you. This time, is there anyone desiring to be heard? Councilor Brower first, former Councilor Brower.
Hello, Gilda Brower, 40 Grover Street. I'm here to announce the fact that the Owasco Watershed Lake Association is having a day, and actually a morning, Saturday, March 1st, from 9 to noon at the Bisgrove Auditorium at the college to review the state of the lake. Dr. John Halfman is the person who does the testing year after year and goes out in the boats and gathers the samples and takes them back to the lab and has them tested. And he is a wonderful speaker. He puts science into a very understandable and interesting talk that at the community college too, with the gigantic screen and the lighting being perfect, you can really see the graphs as he interprets them. So you'll find that very interesting. The next speaker is about the state of the lake in relation to public water supply and recreation. And the third speaker is going to speak about algae and invasive species. So it will be a good, solid morning packed full of information. Again, it's March 1st from 9 to noon, and it's called The State of the Lake. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
I've left some flyers here on the podium if anyone would like to take one.
Thank you. Ma'am, please.
Good evening. Katie McIntyre, 1 Bellevue Place. The reason I'm here tonight is I actually just am a little bit confused about some information I've gotten from the city. One is a notice from the inline Services Incorporated back in November. When I got that notice, I called and I made an appointment for that service to be done at my house. And when the technician showed up, he actually was informing me that our pipes were too old, so he couldn't do the service, and we had to wait for a later date. I did follow up with the city at the end of January to see what the status was, and did not receive a call back, but did receive a letter from the water department just a few days later, letting me know that I have a service leak and that the city would be replacing some pipe at my house, and it would be at my expense. So when I did call about that service leak, I was told that there was actually not a leak, but they didn't know what else to put in the letter. So that's what they put in, and I should expect it to be maybe about $1,500, but they would let me know. And I'm just very confused about the whole situation and just ask that you clarify it for the city residents.
And we're really not allowed to debate, but if you could stick around for a few minutes after we have the public to be heard, and maybe Mr. Sullivan, I'm sure he can either answer your questions or put you in the right direction, but we're not allowed to do it in this particular portion.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Please.
My name is Jeff Sorensen, 12 Woodruff Place. I received a letter from the City of Auburn Department of Fire. We had purchased a house next to us. It's a two-family at 1416 Woodruff Place in February of 2012. And it was condemned and vacant at the time, and we've slowly converting the house. And this letter states that there's a new ordinance. Because it's vacant at the time, there's a $50 fee to register and a $250 first-year fee to be issued for the vacant property. My question is, I've had 4 contractors in there. If they were up there looking at the property, you can see it evolving, and I'm putting my own money into it, and it's frustrating to me that now I have to pay $250 while I'm trying to fix the property up. And you can see the improvements. All you have to do is go up there. And so my question is, how did this come about? The house was vacant when we bought it. Was it registered at the time? Other properties in Auburn, you know, the new development over well, not Owasco, but Orchard Street, are they paying the same fees? I have the permits, and it's an active upkeep that I'm doing, and there's been a new roof on it, new siding, new windows. Just the furnace people were just in there. The plumber's coming in a couple weeks. All new electricity, and now I get a bill for $250 from the city.
Once again, Mr. Sorensen, we're not allowed to answer your question. If you have time, I'm sure between Mr. Selby and Mr. Rossi, we can answer some of your questions this evening.
Okay.
But we just cannot do it at this point.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else desiring to be heard this evening? If not, we'll close that portion of the meeting. With council's approval, I'd like to, if we can handle these 2 matters, so not to hold these folks up, if we could take it out of order, council.
Good idea.
Mr. Selby or Mr. Rossi, would you like to address both of these issues, please?
Mayor, I'll speak to the meter replacement program. We talked about this last week, and just to recap, the city's undertaking a program with a contractor to replace old water meters. There's some 5,500 meters in the city that are more than 10 years old, and when they get that old, they're inefficient, they don't read accurately, and so they're being replaced. They're also being upgraded so that they can be read remotely through just simply a vehicle driving down the street, and they will also log information so that instead of waiting for a full quarter and somebody getting a bill saying they've used a lot of water, we'll be able to flag those accounts and contact the people and tell them it appears there's a leak or something, because we'll have a more regular reading opportunity. This program is about 25% completed. There's about 25% more are scheduled, and then the remaining half have yet to be scheduled. During the process of these meter replacements, the contractor that's doing it has been advised to not touch services that they think might be fragile. In other words, there are a lot of services that are very old, some going back to the early 1900s, that unfortunately sooner or later are going to fail, and we don't want our contractor to be the cause of those failures. So we have had several meetings with the contractor. They're now to hand out a letter to homeowners. If they can't replace a meter, they'll check a box. One of the conditions would be that they can't get to the meter because there are things piled up around it and it's inaccessible. So that needs to be cleared, and then call and reschedule. They'll come back. Others are related to inoperable shutoff valves or these service laterals that might be subject to some failure. And in those conditions, we're advising the homeowners to contact a local licensed plumber, have them review the lateral. And if the lateral needs to be replaced, then once it's replaced, we'll go back in, we'll replace the meter. The problem is that a lot of homeowners are comfortable with the way things are, and we come along and we say, we need to replace your meter, and, oh, by the way, it looks like your lateral is going to fail in the near future, that needs to be replaced as well. We've been struggling with what to do. We definitely don't want to have the contractor go in there and cause damage and leaks and problems like that, but we do need to move the meter replacement program forward. One of the thoughts we had that I'd like to recommend to the council is that during this meter replacement program, that if a lateral is discovered that needs to be repaired, if a licensed plumber comes in and says, you know, this lateral does need to be replaced, that we offer the homeowners a zero-interest loan. Today, the interest rate on a loan for a lateral replacement is 6%. In discussing this with staff, we thought that if we offer a 0% interest rate, repayment over a period of 5 years, or maybe in a hardship extend that to a longer period, that the homeowners then could schedule the lateral replacement. It wouldn't be an emergency. They could get the best price from a plumber, schedule it when it's convenient, get that work taken care of, and that, you know, a new lateral should last 50 years easily, and then they could pay for it over time with this zero-interest program. So that's where we're at. I don't know if that addresses your specific concern, but we can get in touch with you about that letter you got and try to work with you on that, your particular issue. But that's kind of an overview of the program and a recommendation to help move the program forward and also help those homeowners that are going to face replacement of their lateral sooner or later.
Okay.
Doug, have the discussions that you've had most recently dealt with, I guess, approaches in which both the city and Inline can improve when working with the public, so that at least the two parties, the Inline and the City of Auburn, are on the same page? Because I think one of the things that is at least is problematic from the point of view of Auburnians is that, you know, one party says this and another party gives them a slightly different assessment. Has there been any improvement on coordination?
There has. I think that handing out this letter, which we'll start doing this week, I think they started actually this week, is going to help because it simply states, you know, there are 4 reasons why the meter didn't get replaced. It gives the homeowner the information recommending they contact the plumber. It gives them the phone number for our existing loan program for lateral replacements, and is a consistent message, I think. And you're right. Different installers have told homeowners different things, and some of those things have not been accurate or correct or don't represent the city's position. So there has also been an outreach effort in the newspaper. The company doing the replacement put ads out. Unfortunately, the shopper changed the phone number to some, you know, consumer hotline or something. And so that's being corrected. It wasn't the contractor's fault, but the shopper apparently got the number wrong. So we're trying those outreach efforts, and we certainly encourage people to call us if they have an issue.
Counselor.
Oh, just wanted to ask, what is the point person here? What department, if someone had a question or
Most of the calls end up with Tom Gaybeck, but people can call my office.
and then the city manager's
Yeah,
office?
255-4146.
Okay. That just in case that someone wanted to call someone that, the right department.
Right. Right.
Counselor.
Doug, on the vacant building issue,
Before you get involved
Yeah,
in that, can we
could
finish?
we hold off until, Counselor, we get back on the water meters?
okay.
Counselor
I just had
Camardo.
a few comments. Number one, I'm all for helping the homeowners who are impacted by this program. I think it's important that we move forward as a city and try to help out the taxpayer in any way we possibly can, especially when they're facing hardships like this. I do caution the city in the future when we're doing programs like this that we got to give some better thought to the whole program, because I was contacted this past week on an individual who took a day off of work, and Inline came to replace the meter and walked downstairs and said, "Oh, it's an old galvanized line, we can't touch it." So we have cards on these. I believe we have information on who's got what kind of line going to their houses. We just replaced these meters 15 years ago, I think, or 10 years ago, whatever the case may be, but I think we should have better communication out there, and I also want to ask that, are we doing this on Saturdays so people aren't impacted during the work week where they have to take time off from work to have accessibility to the home?
I don't know if they're working on Saturday. I'll find out.
So I think it's important that we do a better job with working with this company, but most importantly, that we're working with our taxpayers in the community to try to help them, because this does impact the community by making people take time off from work and be available for somebody to come and change a meter. So I just want to make sure that we do our due diligence in the future and make sure that we launch these programs and give it some thought and input, so.
Councilor Cuddy, on the water?
On the water, I also think the 0% interest loan, I like that idea because it's acknowledging the hardship of the homeowner and the taxpayer, but also it's beneficial to both the homeowner and the city to have the most recent technology for the lateral. So it's something that eventually is going to happen. You don't want your water line to break, but the zero interest loan, to me, shows that the city's acting in good faith, and would like to work with people, and I think I would be in favor of moving forward of that kind of no interest loan for helping the taxpayers.
I'd also like to see that on the agenda next week or two, whenever we get that drawn up. And council, is that supportive of council?
Yes.
Okay.
And are we still reviewing whether we're going to go from the main to the property line? How is that going to, because this would be a big impact too on the cost of
Yeah,
the water lines.
we met with the plumbing board this week,
Okay,
and that's in the works. It's
Okay.
it's not finalized yet, but we're working with them and water department to try to come to a solution that's going to be beneficial to everybody.
very good.
Ms. McIntyre, did that answer some of your questions for you?
Yes. I think because I have two issues with the inline, inside my house, and then also this other issue with the main to the curb, I think I'll probably just give you a call.
Okay.
Just to follow up and get a little bit more information, but it was very helpful, being here tonight, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Rossi, did you want to talk about the vacant building, or? I
Very
know
briefly,
Jenny's not here.
just inform the gentleman, this is a recent addition to the code of the city to deal with vacant structures that have been there for many years. And as you may or may not know, on a weekly basis, the fire and police departments do survey these properties, and there is a cost to the city for the time of both our firefighters and our police. The theory with the vacant building registry was to first identify, for sure which properties are vacant, truly vacant according to the code definitions, and secondly, to reimburse the city for the expense and the cost of our personnel, for a better word, policing those areas, those buildings. You bring up a very unique situation where you are dealing with the fact that you're rehabbing a building that was vacant for a period of time, and you didn't have any advance notice to when you bought the property because the code provisions were recently passed within the last couple of months. But we can, I'd be glad to meet with you and to review your situation. You can call the Corporation Counsel's office, which is 255-4176. And I will also discuss this with the police department, the fire department, who did a great deal of the work on the code provisions, and to see if you have a unique situation or these situations could crop up again and how we can deal with them. So if you'd be patient with us, I would suggest that you not file anything at this point and let us deal with your particular situation. 255-4176.
Counselor Rozika?
Now, Doug, when this came out, I made some suggestions to the letter text and even alluded that maybe we should touch the actual legislation. But I also said to the fire chief that I went by each one of those properties, and some of them belonged on it and some of them didn't. And I think what we need to have done is an active recanvass of all those properties to make sure that they are not being rehabbed. If there's a building permit on there, it does not belong on the list. Simple as that. I'm sure he has a building permit displayed, otherwise he wouldn't be having these contractors do this work. So I think that if they have an opportunity to recanvass these properties and make sure that none of them are being rehabbed and fully can support within the boundaries of that text change that I asked for, that these buildings do indeed comply with the need for the enforcement or not. Like I said, I did a canvass myself of all the property lists, and I definitely said some are definitely belonging on that list and others do not. And I even brought up the case that if I buy my neighbor's house and I'm fixing it up, and which basically is his case. And it exists in another couple other cases. So again, I think we need to re-examine these properties, and I think maybe we need to have some level of appeal board or something, or some letter of appeal that doesn't just necessarily include just the fire department, but maybe another entity to review it, perhaps someone in code enforcement, and maybe even or the police department. If it's a vacancy building a building that's vacant that's illegally occupied. So what we need to do is have some checks and balances other than just a single department.
Anyone else? You folks from Bellevue and Woodruff brought a smile to my face. My grandmother for many, many years lived on the northeast corner of Woodruff and Bellevue. So it was a great neighborhood, and it went downhill for a bit, but it's coming back. So it was good to hear people are happily living there and improving the neighborhood. So thank you. Approval of meeting minutes from February 6, 2014. Do we have a sponsor? Councilor Camardo, second by Councilor McCormick. Discussion? Councilor?
I just got to say, I know it's going to sound odd that the previous city clerk is saying this, but these minutes were great. They were fantastic. They're outstanding. I have to say it. They really were. That's my comment.
I think. I learned from the best.
Mr. Savage has been gone for a while, hasn't he? Clerk, if you'll call the roll, please.
We need a motion.
We did from Councilor Camardo, and second by Councilor McCormick.
Oh, I was asleep.
There goes the minutes for this month.
Motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of February 6, 2014. Councilor McCormick?
Aye.
Councilor Camardo?
Yes.
Councilor Cuddy?
Yes.
Councilor Rosica?
Yes.
Mayor Quill?
Aye.
Carried.
Our first presentation this evening is Lisa Carr in regards to the Seymour Library. So Lisa, either podium that you're comfortable at, please.
Hi, my name is Lisa Carr, and I'm the director of Seymour Public Library. And I'm here because I had a very nice meeting with Mayor Quill to ask, how can Seymour Library better serve our community? And we had a really nice discussion. And he said that it would be a good idea for me to come in and address City Council. February is Library Lovers Month. I brought some brochures and some newsletters from the library, and I thought I could take a few minutes to tell you, if you haven't been to the library, some of the incredible changes that have happened in libraries in the last few years, and in our library in particular. A lot of people tend to think of libraries as being about books. And I get on my soapbox. I'm sure I said it to Mayor Quill. Libraries are not just about books. Libraries are about connecting people and information. Books are just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more out there. I just finished completing an annual report that I have to do for the state. All libraries have to submit it. And I have all these numbers in my head. We had over 130 classes on digital literacy last year. That's amazing. If you have an iPhone, if you have a tablet, if you want to know how to do a digital download, if you want to know how to make Windows 8 look like Windows 7, we've had those classes in the last year, that and more. We had 147 programs not related to digital literacy, but just programs about local history, about Tulip the reading dog, who was at the library last Friday. If you saw, for First Fridays, we try to have family-friendly events. I know that was on the front page of the paper. And the children's room continues to be an exciting place for kids. And I want to tell you that if you haven't been to the library, stop by and see what's happening. I think you'll really be amazed. We have on average 400 people a day coming through the library, between 400 and 500, depending on, the season. But that's incredible for a community our size. Some people say, well, libraries are just libraries, and what can you really change about them? And I want to just leave you with the thought that all libraries are local, just as all politics are local. So really, the library is a reflection of the community that we have here. And we need you to do your part. Come and use the library. Come and visit. I'm inviting all of you. Stop in. My office is in a storage area down by the drinking fountain, but it's not hard to find me. I'd love to give you a tour and talk about the fun things that we're doing at the library. So thank you very much. And I have these to pass around.
Questions, council, anybody? Council, any questions? All right, very good. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to tell you, we do have digital downloads of magazines as well. That just started this month.
All right, very good. Next, the Franklin Street update. Mr. Lupian, if you would, please, with your guest, or...
As council has requested, I've had Martin Willix here from Erdman Anthony. They're our consulting engineers for the Franklin Street water line. And come on up, Martin. We had a little sample one here earlier to make sure the equipment worked. And now that we got the lens caps off the projectors, hopefully it'll work a lot better.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm Martin Willix. My company's name is Erdman Anthony. We are located in Rochester, New York, just a short 1 hour's drive. But tonight, it was 1 hour and 15 minutes. The snow's coming down. It's getting to be a little bit challenging. But thank you for having me. I'm here to give you an update on where we're at with the Franklin Street Water Transmission Main Project. And just to front what I'm going to cover, I'm going to start with history of the project going back to 1933, then a little bit about the design process, followed by some particulars about the system itself, the areas that it served, a little bit about the analysis that we've done, and then, as Bill explained to me, you're most interested in photos of the project, kind of get an up-close look at what we've been doing out there, where we're at to date, and where we're going moving forward, and more importantly, when we think we're going to be done. Okay, so starting in 1933, there was a 30-inch steel water transmission main from Seminary Avenue to the Franklin Street Reservoir. In 1973 and 1975, that's when the Route 5 arterial came through. And that segment there highlighted in blue from Seminary Avenue to 5 Points, or South Lewis Street, was replaced with ductile iron. That segment that appeared there off to the east in 1984 and 1985 from Prospect Street to the Franklin Street Reservoir was replaced with ductile iron. So remaining in the middle, the red segment, that's the project of today, and that's the original 1933 30-inch steel water transmission main. A little bit about your service area. It is not small. You serve the town of Sonnet, Fleming, Throop, Brutus, Montezuma, Springport, Aurelius, the list goes on, Port Byron, Weedsport, Cuba County Water Authority, Thruway Authority, all in total. I was a little quick with the button there. I think I can go backwards. I can. Pretty close to 45,000 people served. On an daily average, you're pumping into the system a little over 4 million gallons a day. And in 2012, you had a peak daily water pumped into the system approaching 6 million gallons. One interesting fact, and we deal with many providers of water at Erdman-Anthony, some of them upwards of 45, 46, 47, pushing 50. The average is generally greater than 20% loss water. You're only at 16. It's something to be proud of. That's a really good number, very good. And those losses are due to leakage, flushing, street cleaning, firefighting. Really good number. A little bit about the procurement schedule that that Bill has operated under. It's really been pretty much a speed of light. It has from the very beginning with his request for a proposal in April 2012 to where it was awarded to us in August through construction. During the scoping process, the City of Auburn Engineering Department requested that we consider rehabilitation alternatives, not just plain replacement. They wanted to make sure that they were making the right moves, so they asked us to consider both, and we did. So on the rehabilitation side of things, when you're talking about a buried utility, the term trenchless technology comes into play. And basically, trenchless technology, we're not digging to get at the pipe. We're doing it from above, from entry and exit pits. So we considered two initially. One was a cure-in-place option, and that's basically a polyester fiberglass sock, so to speak, that gets essentially inverted and pulled through the pipe, pressurized, either with steam or hot water, to cure it inside the hose pipe. The hose pipe being the pipe that was originally installed in 1933. That option proved to be very pricey. There were some logistical elements to it. We didn't displace it immediately, or we didn't rule it out initially, but eventually we did. The rehabilitation alternative that we looked at more closely, we refer to as slip lining, and that's where you essentially, and now we're referring to the lower figure there, where we have a winch attached to the back of a vehicle. The piping is assembled at grade. It's fused together, and you're taking it from the surface down inside a receiving pit and pulling it through the pipe. And then this little section view there off to the lower right would be it's a cross-sectional view of that pipe being pulled through the hose pipe with the annular space grouted with cement. Bill definitely wanted us to take a look at some different material options, and we did. We considered high-density polyethylene, HDPE. We considered ductile iron pipe, which is what we selected. And we also considered polyvinyl chloride, PVC. HDPE we ruled out pretty quickly. The benefits of using HDPE come in a more rural setting. It is also fused together in long lengths, could be 300-400 feet at a time, and either pulled or rolled into a trench. Down Franklin Street, given the numerous underground utilities that cross the trenches that we have to navigate, we ruled that one out pretty quickly. PVC we considered. There's pluses and minuses to all materials. PVC is one of the pluses. It's a little cheaper, but there's some other people who manufacture PVC will argue with you till they're blue in the face, as blue as their pipe. But it can be point loaded, and when it fails, it does fail catastrophically. You get a small crack, it tends to go right down the pipe and could enter into the next stick of pipe. That's not the reason why. I mean, there's many reasons why we selected ductile. I think it's more important to talk about why we selected ductile. Number one, it's tough to beat. Number two, it resides on the east and both the west sides of our project. City of Auburn's familiar with working with it. Tommy Gayback and his guys, they have the necessary tools because they deal with it every day. I don't know if 100% of your system is ductile iron or cast iron now, but they're used to it. And there's many more. It's got superior strength. It's got a superior life. The 1933 line, that's roughly 80 years. We cut it. It's really served you very well. We expect the ductile to serve you even better. It's not unreasonable to expect 100 years out of it. Then you can talk about rehabilitating it. A little more about your system. It's important to talk about the Franklin Street Reservoir. It is in fact at the east of the project, at the city line. It's 10.25 million gallons in volume. It's important to note that that reservoir is not only a supply and a storage of water, but it's also a source of pressure. It provides pressure back on the system. Operation-wise, in its most simplistic form, at night it fills up. During the day, when the water usage is greater, water's tending to flow out of it. But there's only one pipe that hangs on the edge of that conduit, and it's this 30-inch water transmission main, and it's bidirectional. It's water in and water out through the same line. The Swift Street water filtration plant and pumps is another important component of your system. What's important to know about that filtration plant and the pumps is that they're running 24/7. When they're not pumping water and it's being used, it's pumping water into the reservoir. That's the way the system was designed. And those pumps also provide pressure and flow to the distribution system and to the Franklin Street Reservoir. And it also provides the necessary head to pump water to the highest point in the system, which is the Franklin Street Reservoir. Another important thing to note about the Swift Street water filtration plant and the pumps is that because the pumps are there and because they can provide pressure, it does allow for maintenance or for short durations when you can take the Franklin Street Reservoir out of the system and things still operate and basically nobody knows it's happening. So there's been some points in the project where we've asked Anthony DeCaro to change how he runs the filtration plant a little bit so we can in fact shut portions of that transmission line down so we can work with it. Throughout the design, we asked ourselves 3 questions often, and one additional that I didn't write down. But how do we keep that Franklin Street Reservoir operational? How do we minimize its downtime? Of course, this is all during construction. And how do we continue to replenish the water in that reservoir? And the 4th question, the one I didn't write down, is how do we rehabilitate a line, take it out of the system, and continue to flow water to that reservoir? And I'll cover that more as we go. So to answer that question and to answer those questions, we did some hydraulic modeling of the system. like I said, if we need to rehabilitate the line, or if we need to take a portion of it out of service for an extended period of time, we still, no matter what, we have to put water back in that reservoir on a daily basis. So we had to look for other pathways to get the water there. So the first pathway we looked at was large side street connections. And the North Hoops Avenue is the largest and closest line to the reservoir, and it's 12-inch in size. So basically what we did is we said, all right, let's not allow any water to go down the transmission main. Let's only let water go up Hoops Avenue. It wasn't enough. So we continue to look. The next largest main that hits the water transmission main in Franklin Street is North Seward Avenue. It's also a 12-inch. The model said no good. It still wasn't enough, the two lines, Hoops and Seward. So we continue to look. And then we come to Cayuga. That's a 10-inch line. At that point, the model was yielding some favorable results. So that's important to the alternatives that we were preparing to evaluate. Knowing that those three lines were sufficient, according to our model, we knew that this last segment there in green from 5 Points up to Cayuga was the only section that we really could consider for rehabilitation alternatives. And then that segment in blue would have to be installed new. And the assumption is when you're installing new, you're leaving the old one there and using it while we're installing the new one and preparing it for use. So I talked about the model a little bit. We like them. We like to think they're always right, but we know they're not always right. And whenever we get a chance to test them, we do. So that's what we did. We simulated taking that segment out of the system. And we did that by, you see down there in the lower left, valve 977. It's a 30-inch gate valve installed around 1974, 1975 when the arterial went through. And we closed that. And by closing that, that green segment was out of the system. So now the filtration plant the pumps kick in and so it hits that valve, the water has to find someplace else to go. We assume that that water went to Cayuga Street, Hoops Avenue, and Seward. And so when we close the valve, that's the assumption. We knew we had some help from the small 6-inch lines, but the majority of the water is assumed was coming through that line. So we asked Anthony and Tommy Gayback and Bill to close that valve for us, and they were hesitant at first. And I said, well, let's just close it for a day. So we closed it for a day, and things were okay. And they said, now what? I said, well, let's leave it closed for 2 days. So we left it closed for 2, and 3, and 4, and then a week. And then we did 2 weeks and 3 weeks, and we extended that to a little over a month. And Anthony was able to make small adjustments, and he only saw minor increases in pressure throughout the system. So we were satisfied that if a rehabilitation alternative proved to be beneficial economically or for other reasons, that we could be confident that we could actually do it and remove that segment from the system while we did it. So real quickly, we developed 2 alternatives. Alternative number 1 was new pipe from Cayuga to Prospect Street and rehabbing Cayuga Street to 5 Points. Alternative number 2, quite simple, new pipe all the way from 5 Points to Prospect Street. We developed opinions of probable construction costs for each of those alternatives. Alternative number 1 was more expensive. That's the one with rehabilitation in it. Alternative number 2, $3.865 million. The difference between the two was only $35,000. We felt it was pretty much a no-brainer. Bill and his staff agreed. Let's put in a new pipe all the way. $35,000. Let's get it new. Let's not mess around with a rehabilitation alternative. And that alternative came with the recommendation to use ductile iron pipe. There were some design challenges along the way. Don't want to spend a lot of time here, but existing utilities, I said it a couple times, they're everywhere. They're crossing our trench every 5 feet. Water services, gas lines, gas mains, gas services, electric, telephone. Most of those were on the gas and electric were on, or I'm sorry, the electric and the telephone around the poles. But there was plenty of gas and water, and sanitary sewer laterals were a big concern for me from day one. Found myself in every basement along the north side of Franklin Street to locate them, to be as confident as I could be with where they were located, and made a determination of whether we could successfully install the 30-inch pipe, generally speaking, all within the Franklin Street pavement without disturbing them. There were a few isolated laterals that I was nervous about. We designed parallel sanitary sewers just in case, and during construction, we were able to navigate all of them. So the sanitary sewers that we included in the contract, they proved to be unnecessary. We just dug a little deeper to get underneath the laterals, so we saved a few bucks there. Another concern was just the fragility of the existing 1933 steel transmission main. You know better than me, but I did see it repaired firsthand on 2 occasions in the short duration that I've been involved in the project. And I know it's been a headache and becoming an increasingly bigger headache as time goes on. That the frequency of repairs necessary getting more numerous each year. So those were key design challenges. Here's a key design element that I think school, hopefully you'll agree. We call it a bidirectional flow connection. When we're installing the new main, when we finally cut it over and connect it to the existing, we need to have the ability to quickly reconnect the side streets. And that doesn't happen in a day. So here in red, working from the text on the bottom, let's just pretend that that's Cayuga Street. So water's traveling from the bottom of the page up, and then the water it goes to 2 places. It either goes to the water main on the north side of Franklin Street, or it travels through the jumper connection and ties to the existing 30-inch steel transmission main. The rest of the piping there, referred to as new jumper connection, we prepared those connections prior to what we call the stage 3 cutover. That's when we actually connected the existing to the proposed. I'm sorry, the proposed to the existing at Prospect Street. So by installing this jumper connection piping ahead of time with strategically placed valves, now the water can quickly just go the other direction and be on its way to the reservoir. We had 3 of these such connections, one at Hoops, one at Seward, and one at Cayuga. There's 4 critical points that concerned me, that maybe I lost a little sleep over while it was happening. The first one was installing the pipe only 7 feet away from the existing pipe or existing transmission main between Prospect and Marvin. We were prepared. We required the contractor to have repair materials should we rupture a hole in that line or have something catastrophic happen to minimize the downtime. But we installed that line from Prospect to Marvin with no failures, no leaks. So that was success number 1. Success number 2 quickly followed. That's at Marvin, the existing line moves or travels from the north side of the Franklin Street pavement at 45-degree bends over and then 45s again and hops underneath the southern sidewalk of Franklin Street. And it stays there all the way to the church near Capitol from that point on. So crossing it was a bit of a worry, but we went under it, not over it. The existing line is generally buried 4 feet deep. Our proposed line is generally buried 4 feet deep to the top of it. And But at that point, we dove down deeper, and we went underneath it, and we did that successfully. And that piece of pipe actually looked brand new. And we know much of it does not, because I've seen it firsthand with the repairs. But that section, you wouldn't know it was 1933, at least on the outside. Next critical point of the project was Hunter Brook. Anytime you're crossing a stream or a river or a brook, there's concern. The existing line goes over top of that box culvert at Hunter Brook. So does the new one. And at the same time, there's an important lateral to the junior high school that we had to cross. That was number 3. And we did that successfully. And then the last one, which we've also done successfully, and that occurred on January 20th, is what we refer to as a stage 3 cutover. So that is the connection of the proposed to the existing at Prospect Street, or just west of it, just west of Prospect Street. We can talk more about the details of that cutover, and I have some nice, I have pictures of it. They were taken at night, with most of the work, majority of the work ended up being done at night. So that's a nice topic for discussion if you have questions. Real quickly, I mentioned that that Bill's got us moving at the speed of light, as he has been. It didn't stop from the beginning. We advertised for bid on July 15th. We opened bids on August 7th of 2013. The council here approved that construction contract on August 15th, and construction began this past November. And the first piece of pipe that went in the ground, the first accessory that went in the ground, was a 30-inch butterfly valve just west of Prospect Street. And that is the butterfly valve there. And if you can see it on the left-hand side, you see something that looks red. That's just quite simply to get you oriented. That's the nut that opens and closes the valve from the surface. We selected butterfly valves. They're substantially cheaper, but they work excellent. They're probably a third of the cost of a gate valve. And that valve is attached to the first stick of pipe. And it nicely has number 1 written on it.
Nice thing is about the butterflies is they don't build up anything in the seats,
That's right.
like the gates.
That's right. And they don't. And another nice feature of the butterfly valve is there's not a bypass valve to equal pressure, and you essentially get equal pressure on either side of the butterfly, and anybody can turn them.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be concerned about turning the wrong one at the wrong time. So this starts a string of photos, and generally speaking, they're in order. But no sooner I say that, and a picture will show up in the wrong spot. But there's that stick of pipe. Stick of pipes are roughly, they vary 17.5 to 18 foot 11 or so in length. You might get one that's 19. That's just the way they're fabricated. But there it is, being lifted into place just west of Prospect Street. Hopefully these pictures are showing up for those of you in the audience. We can always come back or look at the recitation later. I can leave it behind. This photo is looking easterly, and we're probably 3, 4, maybe 5 sticks into the work at this point, and there's another stick being set into place. Here's the photo that's slightly out of order, but we had to. But this is work that occurred earlier. This is crossing of Hunter Brook, but it's not the 30-inch transmission main. We had to relocate the existing 6-inch water main to make room for the transmission main. And we replaced that section of 6-inch with 8-inch, and then just connected to the existing 6-inch on either side. When we did that work, it also had to navigate its way by the lateral for the junior high school. That's what's pictured here. It's a little hard to see, but that guy's got his hand on the sanitary lateral coming from the school. And at his back is the water main that's kind of 45 and down to get some adequate bury and adequate clearance between the two pipes. I apologize, not a real exciting photo, but a stick of pipe is a stick of pipe, and this is another stick of pipe. And it is 30-inch, and I can't tell you where it is, but I think it's somewhere around Marvin. We've had some weather conditions to deal with. You can see as the snow comes and goes. But again, we're in the vicinity of the college. And we stay in front of the college for a little while. They got a few parking lots there, so some of these photos are, well, this one's labeled at Bob Dean. Right there on the left is Bob Dean Drive. And in the background of that photo, we backfill the trench with sand around the envelope around the pipe, and then rather than change materials with just something that's suitable, from the top of the sand, which is buried 1 foot above the pipe, we come up with crushed stone. That's the material we would use for subbase under any driveway or any roadway pavement. And we take that material all the way up to through the subbase of the road, which the asphalt will be placed on top of. And that's what they're installing there in the background of that photo. And boy, the guy in the trench is disappearing, but he's in there and looks like he might be installing the next rubber, the gasket inside the pipe. Again, we're still at community college, but now we got a concrete truck in the photo. Anytime we got, I'll just say closer than a standard distance to a storm or sanitary sewer, the contract requires the joint. The pipe is not only wrapped in polyethylene, but it's also the joints. We concrete and fully encase the joint if we're closer than standard to storm or a sanitary line. So that's what's occurring there, and I got some close-up photos of that. Not that it's too exciting, but that's what's occurring there. I mentioned that we have lots of utilities across. They're standing on top of the new 30-inch that's poly-wrapped and at least a third of the way backfilled, and they're dealing with, which is probably a gas line that maybe was staked out inappropriately, but at any rate, it looks like they're fixing one that was broken on their way by. And just to get you oriented, at this point in the project, we're at Hoops Avenue. Production's really been very nice for the city, for the contractor, for Urban Anthony on the design side. I'll tell you what my guess was. That was 80 feet a day. I know what the contractor's guess was. It was 100. And they've had days that exceeded 180, 160. I think their average is somewhere between 140 and 160. So things have really gone very nicely as far as installing lengths of pipe and getting good production.
You're saying in feet then, 140, 160 average?
140 to 160 feet a day.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, which is really a really good number. It really is. May not feel like it as we drive down Franklin Street, but things are actually progressing very nicely. That's not a good photo, boy. It looked a lot nicer on my laptop. Just in front of the bucket of that excavator at the top of the photo, this is the crossing of the existing 30-inch with the new 30-inch at Marvin. You can barely make it out in that photo. There's just a concrete joint, fully encased in concrete. And they say they're fully encased. They don't backfill those joints until that concrete is there. And we vibrate that concrete to make sure it gets down and fully under. Make sure that joint is fully encased.
What is the idea of that?
Additional protection from potential contamination from a storm or a sanitary.
Seals and stabilizes.
You don't see this every day, but there's a nice big long stick of ductile iron pipe straight up and down being staged and ready for install right in front of the junior high school. And if you look real close, I believe right there at the guy's helmet is a connection for a hydrant. Stage piping at the school. I don't know for certain. I think that valve is potentially a service valve for the school. The school is the only customer connected to the transmission main, both the new and the existing. And there's two of them. Basically, it loops into their property. So we maintained the only customer that was serviced from that transmission main, and that in fact is the school. Everyone else is off the water main, including the college. And they have a second feed, I believe, on Prospect Street. That's just another view of the same valve. I believe that title of that photo is correct. This is near Seward. At Seward, we dug a little deeper to get underneath some sanitary laterals. And you can see that guy's kind of being dwarfed in that trench. We were deeper. Like I said, on average, we're 4. To the top of the pipe here, we're probably 6 or 7. That'd be the max depth I think we buried pipe to date, about 7 feet to the top. Again, we're near Seward. We're a little past Seward, I think, at this point. The trench is more typical, right around that 4-foot depth. We're back up. It's backfilled with sand, waiting for the next stick. Now we jump a little bit, but we're not jumping too far. But this is right at Cayuga. Next photo shows a stick of pipe that they assembled there ahead of time before they set it in. There's some benefits to doing that. It's a lot easier to turn 20 bolts. Every joint is 20 bolts. I should say, if we're restraining the pipe. We also use pipe where there's no bolts, where it's just push on. You just simply push them in and you're done. But when we have fittings or any of the bends or valves, they get restrained, and there's 20 bolts around there. And it takes a while to put them together and tighten them up. We're still at Cayuga. We're looking westerly here. At the top of the photo, it's hard to make out. I wish they were coming through just a little bit better. But again, we're looking west in the trench, ready for that piece of pipe that we just saw that's laying there right on the left. And we're preparing, and you'll see it in the next photo, there's a 45-degree bend and then a partial stick of pipe, because we're heading over to the south sidewalk to make, that's, the existing line is over there. And from Cayuga to 5 Points, we're installing the new 30-inch line in the same exact spot that the existing one is. So this is that length of pipe between Cayuga and 5 Points that we could have rehabbed. So similarly, we don't need it. So we don't have to be someplace new. We can be right in the same spot. And there's 2 big benefits that come with being right in that same spot. Number one, we know it's going to fit. There's nothing in the way. Although we'll probably hit a water service along the way and maybe nick a sanitary lateral along the way. But there's nothing in our way. That's one real nice benefit that we realized by doing the analysis early and proving that we could take that segment out of the surfaces, that we can do this. The second benefit that we get from being in the same place is we don't have any substandard separations from storm or sanitary sewers. So it should be unnecessary to concrete any of the joints from here to 5 Points. That's probably the best picture I have that kind of shows that bend. Now you're kind of looking north, westerly, and the guy right there with the orange vest is right on the 45-degree bend, and so that stick of pipe is in the ground today, ready to be extended across the rest of Franklin Street, underneath the southerly sidewalk of Franklin Street. And then that 10-inch valve there in the red-orange, that is the that's where the bi-directional flow connection for Cayuga Street would connect. And here we go for the fourth critical portion of the project, which we refer to as the Stage 3 cutover. This is this photo. As you look at this photo, you're looking westerly. We're just west of Prospect Street, and in the lower left is the existing ductile iron pipe that we're connecting to. The guy there in the yellow vest is working on a solid sleeve, basically a coupling that connects 2 pieces of pipe together. In this case, the old to the new. To his right, you can see a short stick of pipe, And then it's hard to see, but there's the first 45-degree bend is right there. And it's 45-degree to the south a little bit, where it'll be mated up with another piece of pipe and another 45-degree bend to connect to the new transmission main. Just another shot. The night photos are tough. It's the same view, just a little closer in. Same view, just a little bit later. And we're just a little closer to actually making the connection at this point. And this photo here brings us right up till today. We've had, the job has been very smooth from a construction perspective. We really haven't had many hiccups, but we have had some. One of those hiccups was, valve number 977, I'll never forget it, at 5 Points. It leaks, and it's caused some heartache. We have an extra valve in the contract, and we're making use of it, and we're making good use of it. And we're making use of it at the intersection of the arterial and seminary. And we made use of it today. I took this photo earlier. This is that's a two solid sleeves and a 30-inch butterfly valve, which we cut in on the ductile iron pipe installed in 1974, 1975 when the arterial went through. There's no valve down there, which is why I say we're making good use of this extra valve. And now it's serving two purposes. One, it gives Tommy Gayback a way to control his system better. And it's also going to allow us to quickly remove piping just east of 5 Points on the east side of valve 977 that leaks. So now that this valve is installed, we'll be able to shut this valve and stop it from leaking, finish our dewatering, and continue to install new 30-inch pipe from 5 Points up to Cayuga Street.
That valve number 977, if I understand you correctly, that's leaking. Will that be replaced, repaired, or will that eventually be out of the system?
We're going to remove it from the system. That wasn't the original plan. We were going to connect to it and leave it in the system and install a new valve about 5 feet away from it. So we're going to remove it. We're going to add just a little pipe and put a new valve as planned right there.
So the leaker will be out of there then?
It'll be out of there, okay. Right. And while we're removing that valve, we're also going to remove what we call a dresser coupling and a couple of short lengths of pipe, which are always good to get rid of. And they set just west of that valve.
Leak points.
So at the moment, we're calling that Plan B. So part one of Plan B was executed today successfully inside of 4 hours, which is worth noting. We had hoped that the State Street cutover would happen, the actual connection of the pipe would have happened in 4 hours. That was the plan. There were it took longer. Things don't always go as planned, but sometimes they do. The plan today was to get this done in 4 hours, and we got it in 3.5. So it was a good day.
It was a large hole you had there on.
It was large hole and a lot of work going on in it and a lot of good stuff, and it was all very positive. We were successful. Nobody's boiling water, and the pressure's back up. Okay, we're almost to the end, and now it's time to talk about where we're going from here. I clued you in a little bit, but the next move is essentially to install new 30-inch pipe in the same place that the existing pipe is, from 5 Points to Cayuga Street. And right now, we anticipate that work being done by April 1st. And we anticipate that work starting, with a little bit of luck, with a permit from the DOT within just a few days. So maybe middle of next week, we'll be starting that work. And right now, the plan is to start at 5 Points and work our way up to Cayuga Street. And it's looking like the plan is to be done with that by April 1st. Now, after April 1st, or at April 1st, essentially all the big pipe is done. And then it's just the small stuff. So we're going to go from 30-inch down to 3/4 and 1 inch and 1 1/4. There's some galvanized and lead surfaces that tap the water main within the street. And Bill, like he always insists, let's do it right. it's not right to leave those lead surfaces in there even though they're not causing us trouble. Let's replace them with copper. So that's what we're going to do. So we would anticipate that type of small work to continue after April 1st on the water side of things.
So you're replacing all those lead whips?
Lead
whips?
whips,
Yeah.
yep, lead surfaces and galvanized surfaces. There's not that many of them. If I had a guess from memory, 17 to 20 in total, with the remainder of them already being copper. And then, what's left is final surface restoration. The construction contract carries us to June 30th. We hope to be done prior to that, but that's when we will be done by June 30th. And what will we be doing? Well, when the weather cooperates with us a little bit, and it will soon, one of the first things we'll be doing is we'll be getting in, we're going to restore all the trenches, and we'll restore those trenches with full depth asphalt. That's a pavement section that matches the street, which is about 9 inches worth. As we do this last length of 30-inch piping from Cayuga to 5 Points, there'll be some disturbances there, driveways and stuff. We're right in the sidewalk. So there's a few headaches that'll come with that, but we will be restoring everything we touch. We'll be reconstructing driveway aprons. Driveways will be, if they're asphalt today, they'll be asphalt tomorrow. If they're concrete today, they'll be concrete tomorrow. Any curb lines we disturb, we'll either reset it if we can. If it's in bad shape, we'll replace it with new. If it's concrete, we'll go back as new concrete curb. We've disturbed some sidewalk along the way to date. We'll repair that back new. We'll definitely be redisturbing all the sidewalk from Capitol at the church up the hill to Cayuga. That'll all go back in new, all new sidewalk. Every tire rut, every lawn that we touch will all be topsoil and seed and made green again. Any tree removals that have occurred, there's been a couple so far, kind of some that maybe aren't so healthy, some are just flat out in our way. We've taken down, I think we've taken down 2 or 3 to date. We will replace them, and we'll replace any others that we disturb or that we disturb and we don't think will survive. But we will replace them. And then when we complete that work, towards the very end, the whole job included in the contract, curb to curb, full width, will be milled and overlaid with asphalt. And we'll follow that up with striping. And at that point, we should be looking really good. Franklin Street will be Franklin Street again, and it will look nice. And like I said, that work, the contract goes to June 30th. We'll do everything we can to be done earlier, but it will be done by June 30th.
Bill, if I could ask you,
Yes, Council.
I did mention about curb replacement. Have we had any homeowners come up and want curbs in the locations that there were no curbs? Have any taken advantage of this opportunity? Because while they're deployed, I mean, to set the curbs, it's just, once they're deployed, I mean, they can just...
Right, you're correct, and we sent letters out to the adjoining areas. I'd have to look upstairs to see if anybody's responded yet. Most people tend to wait to the last minute.
That's what I'm wondering, is if they're not really keeping it in front of their mind that, there's a time that we need to get this
Right.
agreed upon. I mean, because, once they're deployed, setting curb, it's much easier to go continually than to come back later.
And that's why we sent those letters out, so.
Okay. So maybe if you, I don't know, is it a big deal to send a reminder?
We, if so wished, we would be glad to, we can send a second letter out, or we could just,
Maybe put notes in the doors or something?
we've put, well, I think we've put things on doorknobs up and down the street and throughout the project. We can definitely do that again. Yes.
Well, I just think it'd be to their advantage. I mean, if they do want a curb, now's the time to do it.
But a lot of the street already has curbs, so, fortunately. But, yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Sure.
Mayor, I just,
Counselor, I'm sorry.
Bill, if you would, please. First of all, Martin, thank you for the update. That's a vital artery in the city, providing not only drinking water to the city residents, but throughout the whole community. So I'm glad to see we've gotten outstanding progress made so far. We've all had our concerns because this project started during the winter months, which is very difficult. We've had a tough winter so far. And I know there were assurances not only from yourself, Bill, in your office, but also from the contractor that people would be impacted on Franklin Street as little as possible. I talked about this last week, and I had gotten some calls from neighbors up in the Franklin Street area, and I was surprised to see how rough the road was, the condition of the road was. We talked about this last week. I talked about it with Doug this past week. What's your plans for making that road at least accessible? Because it strongly needs some attention.
Well, I mean,
the potholes are just unbelievable, and the contractor took the contract with the understanding that it was going to be winter months, that there was going to be just coal patch he was going to put down, and so on and so forth. But it needs attention and needs immediate attention, and we've got to stay on top of this so that people can use that road without being impacted the way we told them they weren't going to be impacted. So
we'll continue to get on the contractor to make sure that he keeps that road as level as it possibly can. But I mean, we're very limited in the winter months of putting something down where it's going to stay there. It's a matter of just going back over and over again, just keep filling those holes, and we'll just keep right on top of it.
Stay on top of it,
Yeah,
Bill,
we will.
because it hasn't happened so far, because the road really needs some attention up there.
We'll get back out on it. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other question for Martin? Is it Martin?
Martin.
Anyone else?
I have just one more
Please.
slide, and that's just a thank you. Appropriate at this time. The public has been gracious, they've been tolerant. That doesn't mean that someone doesn't have to feel the complaint, but they've really been very nice to deal with.
Martin is a tough act to follow, so I'm not going to be quite as in-depth as he just went through with our Franklin Street water project. But I'll definitely do our best. Since our Director of Municipal Utilities isn't here tonight, I'll try to talk to her system to the best of my ability. And Anthony is here tonight, though, so if you do have some technical questions about components of his plant and the pumping station that we're going to be looking at, he is here to answer those. And Martin did a good job of stealing a lot of my thunder tonight. So just really briefly again for our new counselors especially, where are major facilities for, Martin talked about our distribution system. And what I wanted to do tonight was to kind of prime council and let you look at sort of the brains of our operation and the pressurizing of the system. So the water filtration plant, which is over on Swift, is composed of 7 main buildings. Lower pump station is also there, located in the upper right-hand corner, labeled building number 8. And then upper pump station, which is where the raw water intake is at the lake, is at Emerson Park. And those are the facilities that we're going to be talking about tonight. Just briefly touching on our capital planning over the last 5 to 10 years. The city has really taken a proactive approach to capital planning, particularly in the water and sewer area. In our 2008 plan, we had 28 sewer and 22 water projects. Staff has been able to utilize these plans and apply for and leverage 0% loans from New York State EFC as well as grant funding for these projects. So we're currently working on or completing 14 of those capital projects from the 08 plan. About this time last year, we had completed an updated plan. So after 5 years later, that plan then was used this summer to help leverage more points for a project that we had submitted to EFC for financing for our water filtration and pumping stations. So we're really excited that the city is continuing to keep a proactive approach to planning efforts, and right now the residents continue to see a benefit from those. So here's the list of the projects that are included in that application to New York State EFC. We have two critical areas that we really wanted to focus on tonight. One is the rapid sand filter plant, and then the lower pumping station. Right now, we're eligible for subsidized funding from EFC for these projects. We also have an application in for 0% financing through their hardship waiver program. But in order to utilize these financing, the city has to complete the bond resolution, environmental review, an engineering agreement, as well as our financial application to the state by March 1st. This is so that this is their hard, fast deadline for drinking water projects, and this would allow us then to access the funding that's been allocated in the 2014 intended use plan. So if we miss this date, we're going to have to wait a whole nother year before we're going to be able to access those funds. Now, that's not to say we can't do some of these projects on our own, but that would be through municipal financing and not through is a low interest rate or potentially even grant funding that we could get from the state. So really briefly, the projects that were included in that application, at the water filtration plant, the rapid sand filter plant, really requires the majority of our critical improvements at this point. The flume wall that's labeled there, you can very clearly see it's spalling, severely deteriorated, and at this point really needs to be repaired. We need to work on this very quickly. We want to make sure we avoid any type of untimely shutdown at the plant. Also at the rapid sand filter plant is the vacuum priming system. This system is for the low lift pumps and the backwash pumps. It is aging, requires a lot of maintenance. Failure of the priming system would result basically in the plant's inability to run the pumps and would cut off the city's supply capability. So the recommendation at this point is to replace the existing priming systems with similar skid-mounted units. There is also a priming system at the upper pump station, so that's one of the projects that would also be completed at that location. Also there at the rapid sand filter is the backwash system. That backwash pump on the upper picture, labeled original pump, is original to the plant since 1969. So basically, we have purchased a backup pump. It currently sits idle and is not run in parallel to the existing pump. So without that redundancy that's installed in the system, again, a pump failure would really cause severe problems at the plant. So what we're looking for at this point is actually to remove the original pump, refurb the pump, install the backup pump, and then potentially look at a parallel system for a backup of the old one. That could potentially be expensive, so we're definitely going to install the new one, and then we'll take a look at, through engineering analysis, whether or not it's feasible to do a parallel system. Also at the filtration plant, the flocculation and sedimentation basin, that section of the plant is used to remove the turbidity from the water upstream of the rapid sand filter. So at that facility, we have 12 flocculation motors and 5 rapid mix motors. These motors are more than 12 years old, and they're failing on an increasing basis and causing increased maintenance costs. So that's something that we're looking at replacing. Their counterpart which with most of our motors and efficiencies these days are the VFDs. They also have exceeded their useful life and are critical to the operation of the flocculation and sedimentation basin. So we're also proposing the replacement of these as well. All right, lower pump. This is the majority of the project. So we just talked about the scale at which Franklin Street transmission line in that project. Lower pump station, even though it's a small facility, shouldn't be looked at any less. These pumps are truly critical to the system. They pressurize the entire system. So the pumps that are there, there's 3 pumps currently, 2 of which date back to 1968, 1 from 1929. They're high service pumps. They feed the entire system. They have not been rehabilitated or refurbished ever. So due to their age, there's a lot of inefficiencies, and their probability for failure is fairly high. So as I said, basically the loss of any one of the pumps could basically have a loss of system pressure, and regardless of however the water is, if you don't have a pressurized system, no one has water. So along with the pumps, also at the facility, there's 10 isolation valves. The city is not sure, but we're fairly confident that none of the valves are operational at this point. So if there is a major problem at the facility, we have no way to actually shut down the facility to isolate any part of the pumps or the facility. These valves are fairly large valves, similar to the ones you've been seeing, 14 to 24 inches. So at this point, we're definitely recommending that the valves, a lot of the pipes where we're having problems, also be replaced. The one issue I did want to bring up at this facility is we have some engineering estimates as to what needs to be done at the facility. We haven't actually done a full-scale engineering report yet, and that's what I'll be bringing to council next week for approval. Once that report's done, obviously we're going to want them to look at alternatives for the facility. There's a lot of abandoned pipes in the pipe gallery, close quarters working in. We may really run into some major problems, and it may not be just as simple as an in-kind replacement as we hope the project to be. There's been schools of thought of a complete replacement of the facility, all the way down to just replacement in kind if we're that lucky. So as we do the engineering work, we'll definitely keep council apprised of what's going on and let you know if the scope of the work is going to change for that one part of the project.
So is that included in the $3.4 million or no?
What's included in the 3.4 is what I've proposed tonight, is basically
You're talking
replacement in kind,
You're talking
not
about the
construction of a new facility.
The additional engineering work that you're going to be looking at?
Yes,
that's gonna
all of that's in there, yeah. That's in the
there.
3.4.
Okay. So if you don't need that, then we're going to be borrowing more than we need?
That's why we would come back to you and we would have a talk of potentially amending a bond ordinance if we needed to. We do the best we can when we're looking at initial estimates.
So why don't we do the engineering work first and then have a bond ordinance so we know the total amount that we're going to be bonding for?
If I want the engineering work paid for with 0% financing, that's why we're doing the work now. I'm trying to get the financing in place so we're really not having to pay interest on any part of the project as much as
There's a
possible.
deadline that you're trying to meet for the 0%.
Right.
And when's that deadline?
That's March 1st.
How come we didn't do this work ahead of time for the engineering work, though, if it was
We've been working on this
anticipated?
for years, truly.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying if you think that there's additional work that needs to be done, how come we didn't do that engineering work ahead of time? I understand, but we don't have an answer as of now.
No, we don't. So until you actually do that full-scale engineering report, you're not going to know. And
I guess my question is, why didn't we do this ahead of time so we know? Especially this opportunity to go and get
I'd like you to be a little more
1 second.
specific to what?
Christina just asked about additional engineering with this project.
Right.
How come we didn't do that ahead of time is my point.
That question I can't answer. I've been making requests for this pump station for 5 years at least. I took over responsibility for it in 2007.
So who's got an answer for it, then I should be asking?
I suggest that you kick the question upstairs from me, because I don't make the decisions of policy for my department. But as far as having an engineering recommendation done, Siemens brought forth a couple of proposals in their energy savings contract, neither of which really were adequate to address the problems that we have at the station. The lower price of the two didn't answer the question of what the problems were, and the other, we thought at the time, the price tag they gave us as an energy abatement was too costly. So I made the request that we have an engineer, a different engineer, look at this, and that's what the result of this is. But the only question now was that since this funding became available with such a short time frame, Christina was putting together this package before the deadline.
I understand.
That's the answer I can give you. Those are the facts.
The question I have is, if we knew we needed additional studies on what you're proposing, why wasn't that done? And
because of the funding. We need the money to do that. And we don't have the money to do that in our budget, but a grant opportunity like this gives us the money to do that study. That's your answer.
So, but we're going to be putting a bond out for $3.4 million, and that might not be enough because additional work might not have to be completed through additional engineering work.
I'm not following your train of thought. We need the money to do the study.
Tony, let me just make this clear if I can.
Yes,
Christina just said that there might be additional engineering studies that might have to be completed.
Right.
Correct?
Correct. We won't know that until we look.
Okay, my point was, we got an opportunity to hit 0% financing. How come we didn't do this additional engineering work before? How come it wasn't looked at, is my point. And you're saying you didn't get authorized until somebody else?
Because it wasn't budgeted for. We can't have an engineering study done without having money in the budget to pay for it.
But it didn't come in front of council for that request.
I understand that.
So why wasn't it requested, I guess, is what I'm having a problem with.
And I'm not the person that can answer that question.
Well, who would be able to answer that question?
I would suggest you talk to people higher up in the organization than me.
Can you respond to that,
The
Doug?
project's been in the capital plan that was approved by the council. Oftentimes in these kind of projects, we do have to do an engineering analysis to really determine what needs to be done. Right. In this case, it's a conservative assumption that is put in the budget number, hoping that that's the minimum we have to do. But time and just staff resources to put to these projects is limited. We put a lot of effort to get the Franklin Street line out and underway. Christina's been pursuing a lot of other grant opportunities for various departments. So
Now,
I wish we could come earlier with a complete package and say this is definitively what we need. We're not able to do that.
Just my last question. If there's an additional monies that need to be spent over and above the 3.4 million, does that still qualify for the 0%?
The city always has the opportunity to go back to EFC and request a waiver increase in funding allocation. So yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Cuddy.
I just wanted to say that I'm interested in pursuing, trying to do as much as we can with the 0% financing. I know that in a recent publication published by the DEC, it announced this state coming up with the funding for this, and I immediately called Christina, and she already said we're on top of it. It's perfect timing. So, you know, and having it spelled out in the PowerPoint, I would like to take full advantage of this. Drinking water is something that Auburn has been known in the past for having the best, and I want that to be a goal with our new, with perhaps the new construction and actually upgrading many of the things that need upgrading at the water filtration plant. Also, Debbie and I had gone on a tour of the water filtration plant, and again, and was impressed with what we were doing with what we had. And but I know that we need more to improve and to, again, have safeguards in place so if something does break down. So this PowerPoint seconded what Tony had mentioned, and the tours, that we really do need to have some safety valves so that we can make sure that Auburn maintains the water quality that we're used to.
Sure.
So, thanks.
And Christina, you mentioned that we're looking into redundancy on the pumps as well.
Yes.
That's always a good idea. I mean, it gives you the opportunity to service one and keep the operation while the other is online. If I recall, when I went down to that plant a couple times, I think even with you, Anthony, we walked around there, and those pumps are, I believe they're obsolete models right now. They're what, 3415s?
We have 3420s, and we have two that are 3430s. The era of the pumps that we're using, as Christina said, at the lower pump station, two are 1968, but the other pump that's the lower capacity is 1927.
Yeah, they're iron-fitted brass?
Yep, they're all iron-fitted brass. You know, brass runners inside the cast iron casing.
Brass rings, brass impeller.
Brass rings,
yeah.
brass wear parts,
Sleeves.
all of that, but brass sleeves. You know, they're serviceable up till now, but the problem obviously is that we have 6 isolation valves.
Yeah, they're inoperable.
Those, they turn, the stems go up and down, but they don't seal. And the downstairs is the slide show, is the jungle gym. I mean, there's equipment down there that's 1927 piping. None of it was cut out of process. Water goes through it all, but you see the condition. We can't isolate it. Most of the valves downstairs don't even turn. We've got a valve down there that's not in a picture. I've had 4 different valve representatives look at it, and nobody could identify what type it is. You know, so that's what we got.
Councilor
I
Clark?
just make one final point. I just want to make sure that we come to the table and we can take advantage of every low financing
Absolutely.
possibly, and not have to come back afterwards and say it's going to cost us more money because we weren't able to follow through and try to get some low 0% financing. So I want to see us come to the table and do as much as possible at the lowest possible savings to the taxpayer. That's the point I'm trying to make.
That's always what we try to do.
Sure.
You know, and what I want to point out to you is, you know, you understand that right now we've got 3 major projects going. The State Dam is going to conclude within a couple of weeks for substantial work. Mill Street's going till May. We expect to conclude Franklin Street June 30th. You know, and you can only take on so many projects at a time also. But the only thing that I can't guarantee you, and you'll never hear me promise that, when you have something in a situation like that, a lot of what we'll find out won't be revealed until we get in and start taking things apart. So I can't promise that. Okay? So, but I agree with you that we have to jump on opportunities of funding like this. We give Christina as much, as you can tell what the recital that she did, we give her as much information as we possibly can to present, to get the grants written in on time. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of those are cast iron fittings, and you won't know what's going on until you open them up.
There's cast iron, there's brass, I've seen some bronze, and I've seen some things that I don't want to talk about.
I know what he's talking about.
Are you good, Christina?
So, just a few more. I wanted to talk about the money part.
Please do.
All right, so really quickly, the minor components of this, there's some energy efficiency and HVAC improvements, particularly at Lower Pump Station, where the HVAC is barely working at this point. So we want to make sure that it's doing its job to keep all of the electrical equipment safe and warm. And then we talked Again, more good timing. So talking about taste and odor issues with the system, two very minor evaluations that we want to do to the system. One is looking at the disinfection byproducts within the system, and then also a taste and odor evaluation of the water and what we could potentially be doing to address that due to the blue-green algae blooms that we receive in the summer months. All right, funding for the project. So this past year, the city passed a water fund budget of just a little over $4 million. The water fund currently has an annual debt service obligation of about $270,000. We're proposing a project of about $3.4 million. Working with our fiscal advisors, we ran some numbers and debt service schedules to take a look at our different financial options out there for funding this. Obviously, working through EFC and applying for that hardship waiver status is our best opportunity and would be the least costly to the city and the ratepayers. If for some reason we weren't eligible, we are eligible for subsidized funding. That would be our next best option. And then taking a look at their pool financing versus our bond rate, market rate financing, because of our status, I think is a AA1 community for bond rating. We're very competitive at our own bond municipal rate versus EFC's. So what staff did then is, with the help of Vicki, we took a look at what the impact to the water rates would be once the project was
Just before we
done.
move on,
Sure.
the difference between the Schedule A as what you'd be paying at 3.5%, you'd pay a little over $1 million, $1.3 million. These numbers are just so hard to see compared to zero if you got the 0% financing for Schedules E, correct? I'm talking about total interest paid over the years of the debt.
Right.
So between the Schedule A and what we'd be paying at zero, it'd be almost $1 million more in debt payments over the...
That's why, trust me, staff really wants to meet that March 1st deadline this year, mostly because some of these projects just can't wait any longer. Department of Health have put them at their top of their list, and some of them need to be done simultaneously to take advantage of the facilities being down. So like the backwash and the priming systems and then the wall at the Rapid Sand really need to be done at the same time. So that's why making sure we have large financing in place to do these major projects all at once makes sense. And just a very quick look at potential impacts to water rates. Our current rate for this fiscal year is the $2.05 per 100 cubic foot. What we're looking at potentially, it ranges really depending upon the mechanism for financing that we're eligible for. So that 0% is at the low end, which would have a rate impact of about 7 cents per 100 cubic foot, all the way up to 13 cents, depending upon if we had to do our municipal bond rating for the project. This would come into effect probably fiscal year 17-18, that we would look at needing to do the rate increase. The nice thing about working with EFC, if you are eligible for hardship, is that there's no principal or interest payments for their short-term financing, their 3 years. So we kind of get access to their money, do the project, close in a long-term after those 3 years. So that would take us to 2017. That's when we would have to start making payments back on the loan.
So do we know in that meantime whether any additional debt service would be exhausted or not? Are you familiar with the water budget at all?
I don't know if one or two of the debt services are exhausted. We didn't really take that into account tonight.
Just before we go ahead and start looking at increase in water rates, I'd like to see that we
Sure.
do
And
a complete analysis of the
Yep,
budget
this is
there.
just on a per-project basis. Obviously, when we get to that point, we would want to take a look at the whole debt service system at that point for the water fund and make
This
sure
is a
we're
little
not.
far off. It's nothing that's going to impact this year's budget.
No, no. And that's all I had.
Okay.
And Christina, just last question if I can.
Sure.
When would you know about if we apply for that or if we get it or?
Their review, that's what is driving me crazy. They're reviewing it this month, so they could be sending us a letter at the same time we're sending them all of our application materials. So we had applied for that back in November. They have 90 days to do it, so the end of this month is when they have to get a letter out to us whether or not we were eligible for hardship status.
And we need to pass a bond ordinance to go ahead with this project before we can find out what rate we're going to get.
Right, so the bond, it's really a catch. They don't tell you until October whether or not you were eligible for subsidized funding. At that point, you're eligible for subsidized funding. Then you can apply for hardship. So then while they're looking at your hardship, if you don't hear back from them before the March 1st, you still got to get all of those components in if you really want to use that money this coming year. And I think our operators at the plant kind of agree that we need to be moving on some of these projects before they actually get worse.
Thank you.
Good, great.
We just got to keep our fingers crossed so they get the...
Every day.
Thank you, Christina.
Sure. Thank you.
Public announcements, Mr. Clerk.
None.
City manager's report.
Mayor, there's just one item, and since Anthony is here, maybe I can ask him to address it. As a result of some of the water work today, we had some cloudy water, and I took a few calls. Councilor Camardo is aware of the situation. So Anthony, can maybe just give a quick report on that?
Sure. We worked in the area of the eastbound arterial right by the inn of the Finger Lakes, and that's where that 30-inch valve that Martin showed you was placed today. In order to do that, of course, we had to close down a couple of areas of the city for 4 hours and drain the length of the 30-inch line from 5 Points all the way down that hill to the base of the end of the Finger Lakes. Now, when we brought the line back up, understand that's a fairly large volume of water. We calculated that to be around 300,000 gallons of water that main holds. And when we brought it back online, because of the age of the system, we didn't increase pressure significantly to refill that line. And what we get basically is that the 16-inch mains that surrounded it and the 10-inch they were talking about reversed their flow and flow into it. That brought with it a lot of sediment from the pipes. So we not only had some low pressure issues around the city, but we also had some discoloration. It's perfectly safe, but it's rust from the inside of the pipes or from sediment that might build up over the years. Now what we did was, whenever that happens anywhere in the city because of a disturbance in the lines, we keep a call log, and then we go out back to those appropriate places in turn and flush the hydrants and clean the lines out. Okay, now this was more widespread than usual because in this particular case, the line is so big and it involves so much water, and it had the capacity to disturb quite a large area of the piping. I had calls from Elizabeth Street. I had calls from downtown. I had calls from a couple of places on the west end. So it was fairly extensive in how that happened. And we anticipated some disturbance of the line.
But it's safe, there's no problem.
Yeah, everything, the water's safe. We sample at least twice every business day somewhere as a matter of routine. Okay?
Thank you.
Set?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
That's all.
All right. Seeker resolutions?
None, Mayor.
Council, this is the first reading in bond ordinance number 1 of 2014. With your permission, just ask the clerk to read the pertinent, it's all pertinent, but the more critical areas, the remainder of his boilerplate. So if there's no objections, Councilor.
I object. It's his first bond ordinance. I really think he should read the whole.
It's only 3 pages. It's only 3 pages. That's going to be a good one. So. Go ahead, if you would, please.
Sure. Bond ordinance number 1 of 2014. Bond ordinance of the City of Auburn, New York, authorizing the issuance of $3,400,000 in serial bonds to finance the cost of the reconstruction of the city water supply and distribution system. Be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Auburn, New York as follows. Section 1, the City of Auburn, New York is hereby authorized to undertake the reconstruction of the city's water supply and distribution system, including the reconstruction and improvement of the existing water filtration plant and pumping stations, and including the replacement of furnishings, equipment, machinery, or apparatus required for the purposes for which such water filtration plant and pumping stations are to be used at an estimated maximum cost of $3,400,000, and to issue an aggregate $3,400,000 in serial bonds pursuant to the provisions of the local finance law to finance the estimated costs of the aforesaid object or purpose. It is hereby determined that the maximum estimated cost of the aforesaid specific object or purpose is $3,400,000. Said amount is hereby appropriated, therefore, and the plan for the financing thereof shall consist of the issuance of $3,400,000 in serial bonds of the city authorized to be issued pursuant to this ordinance. The city comptroller, as chief fiscal officer of the city, is hereby authorized to enter into an undertaking for the benefit of the holders of the bonds from time to time, and any bond anticipation notes issued in anticipation of the sale of the bonds, requiring the city to provide secondary market disclosure as required by Securities and Exchange Commission Rule 15C2-12. This ordinance or summary of this ordinance shall be published in the official newspaper of the city for such purpose, together with a notice of the clerk of the city and substantially the form provided in section 81.00 of the local finance law. This ordinance is not subject to a mandatory or permissive referendum. The council hereby determines that the provisions of the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the regulations thereunder have previously been satisfied with respect to the expenditures authorized by this ordinance. This ordinance shall take effect immediately, and its first reading tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Selby, is it your plan to have this on the agenda for next week, or is the following week? Because of the time frame?
Yes.
Thank you. No resolutions, local laws? None? Table legislation? Budget discussion? Mr. Selby, is it you?
Mayor and Council, I'll try to be brief, but I want to cover a couple things. First of all, I'm trying to schedule some work sessions for each department to present to the City Council, and I was thinking that we might have a couple special meetings. What I'm proposing is Wednesday, March 12th, and then we'd have our regular meeting Thursday, March 13th, and then the following week, Wednesday, March 19th, with our regular meeting Thursday, March 20th, and dedicate those meetings principally to department heads, 2 to 3 departments each evening, making detailed presentations about what they do and their preliminary budget requests.
So that's the 12th and the 19th? For the special?
12th and 19th would be additional meetings.
Special.
If I may, Council. Mr. Selby, I'll be out of town on the 12th. I do know that in
Okay.
advance, so I would
Okay.
I
We can
prefer
change.
change or continue the same, whatever works best for council, so.
Okay.
But I know for a fact I will be out of
The
town.
19th is tough for me, Doug,
Joe,
because it's a college meeting, but one alternate I was going to say, is Saturday morning work at all?
We could do a weekend, sure.
I don't know how that works. I know you're out of town a lot, and Terry, you're
Saturday mornings are fine with me. Around the middle of March, like, I do agree that we should have a work session and an actual meeting so that we don't.
we did it early, like 10 to 11 or something like
That's
that.
fine,
Or
yeah.
8 to 11 or 8 to 10 or however long you need, and just get it done and out of the way.
How much time would you want to spend on Saturday?
8 to 10 or 8 to 11 would be fine, 8 to noon, something
So
like
we-
that, however you want to do it, so that
Any-
complete.
Personal opinion is anything over about 2.5, 3 hours, there's a lot lost.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
people become fatigued.
Well, if we keep it, I'm thinking if we have 4 meetings, 2 of them being council meetings and then 2 Saturday meetings, we'll be able to get through all the departments and
That sounds good.
hopefully have enough detail that you can have some meaningful discussion and
Sounds good.
we'll move from there. Okay. I'll get back to you then with proposed Saturday dates. Okay.
Okay.
The second item, you should have received the detailed budget reports for the period ending January 31st. That's for the first 7 months, expenditures and revenues. We'll go over those at the next council meeting, kind of summarize some of the highlights. The rest of what I wanted to mention was related to information we gathered from the NICOM conference. Some things, I think, related to the city's budget in terms of what options we might have available to us. The first one, and you've probably read about this or heard something about it, and you may know about it in significant detail, but it's the governor's plan to freeze taxes, or that's what it's been called. This is a plan the governor has announced. It's subject to change as it goes through the legislature, but what we know today is it's a 5-year plan. The first year is called the base year. It would be the fiscal year 2014. In year 1 of the plan, if an entity stays within the tax levy, and I'm not talking about just the city, but all the entities collectively stay under whatever that levy amount is allowed, and it may not be the full 2% because the cost of living index comes into play, and if it's, could drive that 2% cap down even. But everybody stays within that levy limit, then the people who have principal residence in the city and the county would get that same amount of money rebated. So they would get a check from the state for the amount of the tax levy. Year 2, if everybody stays within the cap, and there's an efficiency plan developed that's led by the county to get an efficiency plan together for shared services, consolidation, other actions that create savings, then there's the continued rebate of the taxes. Now, that efficiency plan requires in the year 2017 that there be a 1% reduction in the tax levy. In the year 2018, there'd be a 2% reduction, and in the year 2019, there'd be a 3% reduction. And that's collectively all of the entities within the county. So the school district, the city, the towns, the county, we'd all have to be on board, and collectively, the levy, the total levy would have to be below that number. That's a plan that would have to be completed and submitted to the Secretary of State by June 1st, 2015. If the county doesn't want to take it on, and the county's not being given any special authority, but they've been given the responsibility to coordinate this. But if they don't want to take it on, then the largest entity after the county would take it on. In our case, it would be the city of Auburn. And the obligation would be to coordinate with all the entities that levy property taxes and try to create this efficiency plan. There's a lot of people concerned about this, a lot of challenge, I think, in implementing it. Everyone seems to agree, mayors of villages, mayors of cities that were at NICOM, all agree that we shouldn't be raising property taxes, that they agree in concept with the governor's idea to lower property taxes because New York is ranked among the highest in the country, and it's not attractive to business, it's not attractive for economic development. But in many cases, this formula and this drive for efficiency, a lot of entities think will come at the cost of critical services to their residents. Many, like Auburn, have already cut services. They've reduced as much as they can. Consolidation sometimes isn't an option, and in fact, it comes with a penalty because in the tax formula that creates that cap, if you give up a service to another entity, the entity that surrenders it has its cap effectively lowered. The entity that receives it gets its cap effectively raised. So it's kind of a disincentive under certain circumstances to actually consolidate functions.
I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Then how did the governor come out? He said he was going to reward communities for consolidation plans?
He will basically rebate taxes to homeowners.
But I'm saying he's going to reward us for consolidating. You're saying it could hurt us if we consolidate.
Rewarding the taxpayers.
What his effort is to force cost savings. So let's say that they use the term shared services. We've heard consolidation. I think that's the governor's belief is that I think there's 10,000 units of government in the state of New York, that some of those need to be coalesced, and that would achieve some efficiencies. So I think that's the driver behind this carrot and stick. You know, the carrot is there for the residents, the stick is there for the governing bodies if they don't stay within the cap or develop this efficiency plan.
But did I hear you right when you said that it could hurt us if we consolidate services?
Well, it could change the amount that we're allowed to levy in a tax formula. If you look at the way that levy formula is calculated, if we transfer a service to another entity, it comes out of that allowable levy amount. So, the other concern, and I think we all share this, is none of this comes with any mandate relief. There's no proposal to do anything in terms of pensions or any of the things that are imposed on local government by the state, mandates to enforce certain codes and activities that are coming to us without any supplemental funding. There's also concern that, this is a fairly complicated way to try to achieve that objective. Some have talked and thought that maybe increasing the aid to municipalities, in other words, give the cities more money to work with so they aren't faced with the issue of levying increased property taxes, would be a simpler method of doing this. But today, the governor's proposal is that the aid to municipalities is flat. There's no increase. NICOM has that high on their priority to try to lobby to get the aid increased. The other contribution from the state is the CHIPS funds. That will remain flat under the governor's proposal. Mm-hmm. That too is a NICOM priority to get that increased.
Understood.
So that's very briefly the governor's plan. It has yet to make it through the legislative process, so it could change. Mayor, you were there, Councilor McCormick.
You did a much better job of explaining it than everything down there. It was very confusing.
Okay.
But I won't speak for Councilor McCormick, but there was no one out of probably 250 people there. No one was in favor of this tax cap,
and that included some non-governmental entities, just independent think tanks and consumer representative groups think, again, concept to lower property taxes is good. This approach is fairly complex. Some questions about whether the state will have the revenue to actually rebate the money. Questions about those rebates may be relatively small amounts, and yet they may force local governments to cut critical services. So
there was one figure that came up, and I don't recall where it came from, but a homeowner would receive approximately, well, it's based on $350. When it breaks down to the homeowner, it's about $60 that the homeowner would receive in return. And out of that, as one mayor said, we're each going to receive $10. So I have a choice of cutting police or fire or accepting $10. So I give the governor credit for trying to do something, but I don't think this is working in the right direction. Counselor, please.
A couple of the things that I remember that struck me as hugely challenging is it was a requirement that the county of the municipalities, the county is the lead, they called it the lead agency, that would be required to get all the other municipalities together to come up with a plan as a group to make this work, and if the county didn't want to, then it would fall to the next largest, I think, the city. That was one. And that the fact that the governor is calling it a freeze, which is not, has nothing to do with anything to do with the plan. There's no freeze involved. But it would make the public think that we're not offering a freeze, but it's just an impossible thing to offer, I think.
The counties will be charged with being the facilitator for the meetings.
Yeah.
And then if the county, as Doug had mentioned, if the county decides against it, then it falls to the next largest city. Well, we're the only city in Cuba County. We would be challenged to be the facilitator, but there's no power in it. It's just to convene the meeting and to move it along and try to come up with something. So I think there's 20 plus towns in in the county.
24 in the village, no,
in
the villages.
So that'd be, it's like herding, it'd be like herding kittens, so. well.
The other item that I just wanted to present and ask the council's input on is the restructuring boards. The legislation exists now that's created a financial restructuring board. I shouldn't say boards. There's only one. It's a 10-member board. It includes the budget director, the comptroller, the attorney general, the secretary of state, the Environmental Facilities Corporation president, and 5 other governor appointees. This board's obligation is to undertake comprehensive reviews of operations and finances for entities that are deemed to be eligible for this service, and they would make recommendations to that local government about changes, adjustments, so forth, to achieve financial sustainability. It's a 6-month process. The resources to do it, from what I heard from the secretary to the board, are relatively limited. They have taken a couple cities, have been accepted into the program. Fulton is in, the town of Fishkill is in, and Rochester, New York has applied. We could apply. There's 2 eligibility requirements. Your 5-year average full value property tax rate has to be in the top 25% of the entities that levy property taxes in the state outside of New York City, and we would qualify there. The other is that you're automatically eligible if your general fund balance for 5 consecutive years is below 5% of your operating budget. We wouldn't qualify under that criteria. Today, there are 44 of 61 cities that are automatically eligible, so if misery loves company, I guess we're all kind of in the same boat there. If we go through this process, if we were to be accepted, if we wanted to apply, there is an offer of up to $5 million in grants and loans to implement the recommendations of the Financial Restructuring Board. If we take that money, then we are locked in, we've basically obligated to undertake those actions. I have the impression that this is going to be a fairly selective process, that even cities that are deemed eligible automatically may not get into the program. There are, I think, plenty of cities that might be thinking about doing this. But I think personally, and this is one of those things the legislation is written where both the council and the chief executive have to agree, and I would tell you, I would agree that this is something I think would be worthwhile applying for. We may not have a good chance, but maybe with Christina's writing and our current financial situation and the report that we got from our audit committee, that we may have a chance at this. So I guess I put it out there for discussion.
At the same time.
I agree.
Correct me if I'm wrong, we do not have, if we're successful in having this look-see at our finances, we are not obligated to apply for part of the $5 million. Am I correct?
No, they dangle that out there. If we take it, we're locked in. But if we don't take it, we get their advice, we can implement it or not as we please.
Personally, I like to move forward with this.
Yes.
I think it'd be a good, different set of eyes look, if we're successful in being allowed, it's a different set of eyes looking at what we're doing, and that's my own opinion, so.
I'm a little bit weary of it, believe it or not. But I agree we should, I agree with the mayor and Mr. Selby that possibly we should look into this, but I'm just wondering if there's compulsory things in the if we were offered the $5 million, what kinds of things that we as a council would relinquish, if we were to take that. But I would say, see what the recommendations are if we do get accepted, and if they are amenable to the council and the city manager.
Mr. Martin.
There's two steps. Number one, there's no cost for us to apply for
Exactly.
this, correct? They're going to come, they're going to try to bring some expertise to the community, which I would assume by the governor's recommendations or whoever he appoints to these committees, correct?
Right.
And the second thing is that we wouldn't be obligated to apply for this $5 million carrot or
we would
handout or
not.
whatever you
Right.
would want to say. So, and I think it doesn't look like there's no obligation on our point, or our end of it, other to get information that it's probably desperately needed at the city,
Let's go.
correct?
I agree. Let's go for it.
Okay, it'll require a resolution from the council, so we'll prepare that for your consideration.
Plus a letter from you, we both, you're separate.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can do that. The one caveat is, I don't know when we would get into the program.
What's that?
I don't know when we would get into the program. It could be more than a year. From the way they were talking, their resources are not extensive, so they're being very selective, and we may have to do our best to lobby and twist arms and do whatever we can to convince them that we're worthy and should be put on the top of the
Well,
list.
it's probably going to be a somewhat serial. I mean, first apply is going to be looked at first, obviously. So I think what it is, probably what they'll do is prioritize it based on what they perceive as need.
Whoever goes broke first will get the help.
I'm of the opinion that this is going to catch on with many cities, and I think the governor's going to have to increase the staff members to do this. So, Counselor.
I'm sorry, you might be right. That's what I was going to say. The gentleman that did the workshop on this, didn't he say that they hadn't even started? They've got the three that you mentioned, but they were so busy, they hadn't even started to work on the ones they had. And that was back in the fall, I think, that they, so.
That's all I have.
Well, I have,
Counsel, other business?
yes, I have something. I got a bunch of questions regarding tax levy and tax rates, so.
Excuse me, Mayor, is this the manager's report?
No, this is other business.
Okay. Oh, we're out there.
Okay, what I found on the internet here is a very good document to understanding the new real property tax cap levy. Now, it's not new. We've been through it a couple of years here. But this is the website address, and I really think that the average taxpayer really should probably look at this document and digest it. It's very easy, very understandable, and I think it would educate them in understanding the difference between a tax levy and a tax rate. And it's, like I say, it's very understandable and it'll eliminate a lot of confusion. This is page 1 of it. It's difficult to read, but just so you get an idea, it gives background of what real property tax levy is, and again, like I say, it's very understandable. It talks about what real property tax levy is. Here on slide, this page here, it gives a very understandable overview of what the real property tax differences are between tax rate and levy. Again, on this slide here, it talks about how it's determined and how a tax rate's calculated. It makes clear that the tax rate is a function from the tax levy, and the tax levy is the controlled part of the tax level cap. And it does give 2 clear scenarios. Scenario 1, which is where we are with an increase in taxable assessed value, and scenario 2 is what happens when the taxable assessable value decreases. But since we're more into scenario 1, I think that's where I think most people find of interest. And this is just a summary here of what it covers, and again, like I said, it's very well written. I would highly recommend that everyone pull this off the net. And like I say, the address was on the first slide. So what I did is I came out and did some examples of what this is really about. And in the scenario number 1, and I believe I used Doug's numbers here, we're looking at a 2% increase nominal on our tax levy. The city 2013 levy was 11.8 there, and the 2% increase brings up to about 12, a little over 12. And there's an increase in revenue based on a nominal 2%, which is about 236. So doing the calculation, the rate, if none of the new assessments are challenged, the city rate becomes 11.9682, and then now with the total city rate with the library is 12.42912. Now scenario 2 is the 2% tax increase with the old assessments. So you can see the increase in revenue is the same, the levy increases at 2. However, the rate, because of the distribution over a smaller assessable value, is now 12.83547, and the total taxable rate with the city and library is 13.29637. The rate is calculated by dividing the levy by the assessable value, and times 1,000, that gives you the rate per 1,000. Now, scenario 13, or 3, is the 2013 rate applied to the new assessments with none challenged. This is kind of a misnomer, and if you look at it, the revenue goes up by 855K. And if you look at the percent levy increase, that's 7.25, and that's very likely to be over the tax cap. But you notice if you look at it, the rate is calculated, it comes out to be exactly the same as the 2013 rate, and the library and city rate together is exactly the same. So down below in that little table is what I'm saying. If we're looking to raise $1 million on revenue, the levy increase is going to be 8.47. 1.5 million, it goes up to 12.7. 2 million, it goes up to 16.94. And 2.6, it goes up to 22.02. So what the point is here is, granted your assessment is one part of the amount of taxes that you're going to pay. It really is quite significantly impacted by the tax levy, which in turn calculates the tax rate. Now I want to let everyone know that we know the city's an entitlement city, and that almost 51%, it's actually 50.9%, of the families that are at low and moderate level income, as we discussed last week. And this definition means that they're 80% or less than the median income of the city, and the opportunity to read it, to understand it, and to feel more comfortable about how these numbers are generated.
Councilor McCormick.
I'm not sure how to put this. I appreciate Councilor Rozika's, the work he put into the information that he just shared, but I just want to caution, I have a hard enough time myself trying to understand the tax levy and how it applies and the different things. And I'm not saying that Councilor Rozika isn't totally accurate, and knows what he's talking about, but a lot of the information that we get about median income and the levy and the tax rate and all the different things that go into this, people that listen to this at home take this to heart, and they believe what we as city councilors say. They go through the weekend worried, sick about what they hear at these city council meetings. And if we're not absolutely, positively sure of what we're saying,
trust me, I'm absolutely positive, sure what I'm saying is correct.
I'm not, please, I'm not arguing with you. I just want to make sure, like if I went to a doctor and the doctor gave me my medical review, I'd feel confident in that. But if I sat in the waiting room and the people in the waiting room talked to me about my medical condition, I wouldn't feel quite as confident about it, even though they were well-intentioned and had my best interest at heart, like I'm sure you do. I just caution that I was very confused by what you just...
That's why I gave the web address to the document. I would suggest that you go to the document. It's very readable, very understandable, and it portrays exactly what I did.
Also, one of the things I just wanted to have you clarify was you were saying that 51% of the population of Auburn is below the poverty line?
No. We're an entitlement city because 51% are below they're in the low to moderate income levels. We heard that last week from Jenny.
Certain areas of the city that...
It's almost 51% of the population of the city. She answered that directly last week.
Now, so I guess I would like to see, you know, and again, for a future presentation, you know, how, if the average median income is $38,000.
That came off the census data.
No, I know that, but I'm just saying, you know, if maybe we need to cross-reference that between property owners and renters, and, you know, just to kind of get to align what it is we're talking about.
Regardless if they're renting or owning a house, if the taxes are increased, the landlord is likely to pass this cost on to the tenants. If it's a homeowner, he's going to see it directly, not in the matter of a rent increase, but a direct increase on his tax bill.
He or she.
He or she, correct.
I just wanted, are you?
Yeah, I'm just taking
Counselor?
notes. Yeah.
Counselor.
I would just suggest, as I did a couple weeks ago, that we have Mike Burns come in, and you could verify all the information or have any questions, that we could have a part of a council meeting dedicated to that.
It's very simple. The tax levy is what the real property taxes are. The rate is divided by that levy divided by the real assessed value is your rate. Very simple calculation.
I'm not
I don't
arguing
think
anything,
anyone's
I'm just
arguing with
making a
it. Just
suggestion.
want a different clarification.
Sure. Just making a
I
suggestion.
think that's a great idea. We have an assessor, and I think it would be great to hear from him.
Counselor Camardo.
Yes. Doug, did you hear anything about the funding for the showmobile? I know the nice weather's coming on, and
I have
wanted to
not
follow up
heard.
on that if
No.
possible.
I have not.
Can we get a letter out to Senator
we'll
DeFrancisco's
check with
office?
Senator DeFrancisco again.
Second thing is county meeting. How are we making out with the, we were going to get a meeting going. I hope we can get that before we start our March budget hearings, because I know we'll be tied up for a couple weeks there.
I haven't made as much progress as I hoped to. We were shooting for a Wednesday sometime this month.
Okay, and I
haven't
would
set
just,
a date yet,
I know
though.
you said something about a facilitator, but if we could just have an
Yeah.
agenda written up so that, you know, maybe you or Ms. Sinclair could follow that, and that,
I got a question about
Sure.
the meeting. This might have come up in 2013. What's the meeting for? The county-city meeting?
well, number one, we wanted to talk about, we own $400,000
Okay,
to the radio.
that's right, I'm sorry.
And the second thing, we're going to talk about consolidation, if any possible ways of looking at
Okay.
different areas of consolidation. So those two areas were out there that we're going to have an agenda item, or anything else that council would want to talk about, or the county would want to talk about. But I think those are two areas that we need to focus in on. The last thing I had, Doug, last week you talked about Hoops Park and some of the dirt that was being transported out by some of the local contractors. Now, two areas that I was just thinking about. I know we're going to need quite a bit of cover material for if we did something with Donna McCarthy. Is there any way we could start stockpiling some of that material down there, so if we get to go ahead, that we could make it look
I'll
more
check with
presentable?
Mike, yeah.
And the second thing is, can we use that for cover material in the landfill?
I don't think we can use it for cover material because it's too fine grained, and we need stuff that's kind of permeable for the gas flow.
Okay, whatever, I just, before we,
Yeah.
if we could use it for some of our own
It's got a lot of organic matter too, does it not?
You know, I don't know. It's so frozen, it doesn't, you know, it's hard to tell. I assume it does, but I haven't personally gone out there and stuck my hand in it.
Just the last thing, Doug, how are we making out with that? Is that something that's going to be completed shortly? I know the weather's been a hindrance, but
The weather's been a factor in being able to move. The pond is clean. Those piles you see, the whole pond has been scraped down to its original depth, which even 10 years ago, I understand it wasn't cleaned that thoroughly. So those piles you see are the remnants. They just have to be hauled away.
Probably frozen solid, right?
Yeah. Which is good. It's not oozing out of the back of the truck, so.
that's all I had. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? Do we have a request for executive session?
I just have something with negotiations, just real quick. I hope to keep it short and simple, because I know we were going to have this a short meeting, Mayor, but went on a little bit longer than you anticipated.
Anyone else? Anything other matters? So at this point, I'll entertain a motion for executive session for contractual matter. Is that correct, Counselor Camardo?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Motion by Counselor Camardo, seconded by Counselor Cuddy. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Motion to enter into executive session.
Just want to leave it.
Counselor McCormick.
Aye.
Counselor Camardo.
Yes.
Counselor Cuddy.
Yes.
Counselor Rusika.
Yes.
Aye, we'll be in recess for executive session.